Hello, welcome to the live. I'm going to give it just a minute to give time for people to hop on. As you're hopping on, say hi. Let me know you're here. Let me know where you're watching from. I'm just going to give it a minute. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about my testimony. I've not shared it for just a little while. Hey, Mama. Come on in. I'm going to give everybody just a minute to hop on. I'm going to make sure the live is shared. If you know anybody who struggles with mental illness, click share. That's what I'm going to be talking about tonight, how I got set free from mental illness, along with several other things. Give me just a second. I'm going to make sure the video is everywhere it needs to be. If you guys are commenting and I don't reply to your comments, it's because I can't see them. For some weird reason, sometimes I can see comments and sometimes I can't. So if you have questions and I don't comment, it's because I'm not seeing them. You can personally message me and I will make sure to answer your questions. If I do see them, I will answer questions at the end. You don't see a share button. You can probably go to my personal page and you should be able to share it from there, possibly. Once it's over, I will upload it to YouTube and then I will put it on my page and you can share it from there for sure. If you're watching on YouTube, comment hi to me on there. If you watch this on replay, comment replay and let me know you're watching. So I want to jump right in because I try to make my testimony short and it just gets longer and longer and longer. And so I don't want to keep you guys here all night long. And so I want to make it a little bit shorter if possible. So I'm just going to jump right in. Hello, everybody. Hello, hello. Thank you for popping on. So I am a sexual abuse survivor. As a child, I was sexually abused by my biological father. You guys will hear me talk about my dad. That is actually my stepdad, but he's my dad. He's been my dad since the day he married my mom. When I talk about my abuser, I always call him my biological father, and he's the one who sexually abused me. He actually got into some really dark stuff for a period in his life, and so there was sexual abuse, but then there was also a lot of fear and intimidation and some occult involvement, and because of that, I lived in extreme fear for most of my life. I can remember as a small child, the abuse started when I was young, and I can remember not even being able to sleep at night in my own bed because I would just be so full of fear. I felt like there was somebody watching me all the time. If it was dark out, I was in a panic and I was just so full of fear. That was probably my first constant companion that I can remember was fear, just being afraid all the time. Not only was I afraid of my biological dad, because of the things that he had instilled in me, I thought he could read my mind. I thought that he knew what I was thinking all of the time. So I can remember laying in bed at night and saying to myself, don't think bad about him. Don't think bad about him. Because I really thought that he could read my mind and he would know if I was thinking bad about him. So it wasn't just the abuse. He instilled fear in me from a very young age. When I was 16, I haven't really talked about this a lot. It's in the book that I wrote. I didn't bring one in here. I wrote a book about my testimony and it's called Breaking Out of Darkness. You can find it on Amazon. But that was really the first time I really publicly talked about my first marriage. But in my first marriage, there was a lot of domestic violence. I got married at the age of 16 and the abuse started right away. But because of the childhood abuse, I was already conditioned to hide abuse. I was already conditioned to feel like it was my fault and to cover it up and to not, it never occurred to me to tell anybody what was happening. And because by that time in my life, I already felt worthless. I already felt immense shame. I felt like I didn't deserve anything. And so when I was told that the abuse that I was experiencing in the marriage was my fault, I just accepted it. And I think so many times it's hard to understand why women stay. And I would get that question all the time. Well, why did you stay? Why didn't you tell? But usually there is a pattern in the woman's life or man's, that started way, way before that situation, that conditions you for abuse. It's almost like the enemy labels us and we become a magnet for people to abuse us because it happens in different circumstances over and over. And the only thing I can tell you, it was not even on my radar to tell. Just like it wasn't on my radar to tell about my biological dad, it was not on my radar to tell. So I want to go back though. When I was 12 years old, my biological dad shot himself and tried to kill himself. And that's kind of when the bottom fell out of my world, even worse than it already had been, because I knew at the moment when he shot himself that there was nothing that he wouldn't do, because in his life, he was the most important person. And if he could hurt himself, I knew there was no doubt in my mind, if I had any doubt before, that he could and would hurt me. He was not the type of abuser that groomed me with gifts and pouring love on me and those types of things. He was a power and control abuser. So I can't look back in my life and think on good times with him or have fond memories of him or, have really good feelings towards him. Not that I haven't forgiven, because I've completely forgiven. I'm just saying that it wasn't the type of relationship where we had this really good relationship, but then there was abuse added in. He was very narcissistic and life revolved around him. So when he did that when I was 12, I would say that I was holding on by a thread before that, and that really snapped the thread in half, and I pretty much lost it. I was already in constant fear, but the fear became paralyzing. I can remember laying in bed at night, and I couldn't sleep without the lights on, for one, when I was in a room by myself. And I couldn't sleep without blankets being piled on top of me. Didn't matter how hot it was, I would pile more on top of me because I felt exposed. And then I also had really weird things go on as a teenager. I could be wearing jewelry and it would disappear for a couple of days, and then it would show up on my dresser, like jewelry on my body, and I would wake up in the morning and it would be gone. I would hear footsteps walk up to the side of my bed, and I would think it was my mom, and I would turn around and there would be nobody there. I would hear scratching on the inside of my closet. I would see things. It was nothing to see shadows moving through my room. And I just always felt a constant fear, like someone standing behind you, breathing down your neck. That goosebump, the hair on the back of your neck standing up, because it's like somebody is right behind you. I can even remember being in my bedroom as a teenager and just being chased down my stairs, like something literally chasing me down my stairs, and running as fast as I could because I knew there was something behind me. It was just always that sense of never being alone, always being watched, and always having something tormenting, and it never let up. Even though I wasn't a Christian at the time, I hadn't given my heart to the Lord, I had family members who, I had grew up around the church because I had a lot of family who were saved. And I knew at times that what could help is by putting a Bible, holding a Bible, or putting a Bible under my pillow. And I can remember I had one of those little Gideon Bibles that they gave out at school, and I would stick it under my pillow just trying to get some relief because the torment was so strong. Also, I can remember around that same time when the suicidal thoughts started. I can remember laying in my bed, and my bedroom was upstairs, and I can remember laying in my bed looking at my blinds and wondering if I could wrap them around my neck and jump out the window. And I can remember thinking, will it do the job? Will I die? Because in my world, that was really the only thing I had access to. I didn't have access to weapons. I mean, I guess I could have found pills somewhere, but that really wasn't on my mind. So that be what would play over in my head. Could I jump out the window and would it kill me, or would I just get hurt horribly and then be paralyzed for the rest of my life? So I never went through with that, but the thought would be there a lot. And it was more of a thought of, I just don't want to be here anymore. Life is just too painful, it's too hard, it's too overwhelming. I can also remember that is around the time that I started cutting, And I did that pretty much all the way up into my adult life. I would cut my arms, my legs, not so much as a teenager. I did it sometimes, but not as often as I did as an adult. It's like I laid that down for a little while and then I picked it back up in adulthood. I also had a really weird, bad, unhealthy relationship with food. I did not like to eat. I tried to starve myself. I can remember my therapist at one point would weigh me, and she would say that, you know, you're 1 pound away from going into an institution. And I remember her threatening me with that all the time, and it would make me so mad because I thought it was not her business. It was nobody's business. That was my business. And I can just remember being so angry about that. Also, as a teenager, I made really poor choices. My body meant absolutely nothing to me. I didn't care who I shared with it, didn't care how old they were. To me, using my body to get the attention of men, that's what I did. That was my go-to. That was what I felt like I had to offer, and that was the only thing I had to offer. But I do remember one time, I did have my limits. When I was 14, I was hanging out with guys twice my age, but I can remember being at the mall one time, and I was dressed very inappropriately, and one of my teachers came in, and I remember the way he looked at me, and it gave me the creeps. And I did not like that at all. So I did have my limits. I did not like old men, but I did like older guys. I liked hanging out with them. And in my mind, I justified it because, you know, I always said that I was born an old soul. Like I was always never childlike, really. I always was around people older than me. I always fit in with people older than me. And so it just felt natural to hang out and date guys that were older than me. Looking back at it now, I can see how inappropriate it was and that it was just not okay. Even though I was more like an adult, I was not. I was a kid, and I should have been looked at like a kid, and I wasn't. But I never carried myself as a child. I never hung out with other kids because I could never relax. I could never just let go. And I was never like the laughy, giddy, giggly little girl. That just wasn't me. I was always on edge. I was always hyper vigilant. I knew how to play the game of putting on my face and acting like the people around me would expect for me to act. But on the inside, I was always a ball of nerves. I can remember being nauseated all the time. My stomach would just be in knots all the time. I would vomit, or I'd feel like I was going to vomit. I never felt good. I never felt safe. There was no place in my life that I felt I could go and hide, because even if my biological dad didn't have access to me, the things that were going on around me had access to me. The noises, the shadows, the being chased, the being watched, the nightmares. There was no escape from that. So there was nowhere in my life I could go to hide. I hated school. I was very shy. I can remember on the days when it was like an oral report day or anything like that, I would skip school sometimes. I would stay home sick. I can also remember sitting in the classroom, and even if I knew the answer, there was no way I would raise my hand. Absolutely not. So I can remember sitting in the classroom when the teacher would be looking to call on somebody. I would sit there over and over in my head. I would chant, "Don't call on me, don't call on me, don't call on me," over and over and over. And I would be almost sick, in a panic, scared that they were going to call on me because I did not want to speak in front of anybody. I always felt dumb. I always felt like I could never do anything right. I never had dreams or hopes of becoming anything in life. Like, it was never on my radar that, oh, I could go to school, or I could be this, or I could be that. I was just always trying to make it through the next day. I never even looked towards graduation. I never looked towards a career. I just tried to make it through life. And I never felt like I could be successful at anything. I never had aspirations of having a job or anything, really. I mean, I never looked towards getting married. I don't remember ever looking future oriented. I mean, maybe I did and I forgot, because I do have a lot of blocked out memories still. A lot of my past is just gone. A lot of my childhood is gone. I have very few memories. But I don't ever remember feeling like I had a hope of a future. I just remember thinking, the things that were on my mind was pain relief, which could come in the form of substances or hanging out with older guys. That was basically what was on my mind and what was on my radar. Having a relationship. I didn't care how long it lasted. I didn't care, anything like that. As soon as one relationship ended, I had to jump right into the next one because I did not want to be alone. Even at a young age, I always wanted to have a boyfriend. I already talked about having fear, the terror. Fear isn't really even the right word. If we really get into it, it was extreme terror, horrified all the time, just scared. Even taking a shower was impossible. I would try and I just couldn't do it. I would have to take a bath most of the time. If I was able to take a shower as a teenager, it was very rarely because I was horrified of the bathroom. That is the area where a lot of the abuse happened. And I had extreme terror of the bathroom. I couldn't have mirrors in my house in my bedroom. If there were mirrors, if I went and stayed somewhere, I would have to cover them up because in my biological dad's bedroom, there were mirrors in his bedroom. And so from that point on, I couldn't be around mirrors in my bedroom. Like during the day, it didn't bother me. But at night, I couldn't do it. I would have to cover them up. I can remember going and staying at different family members' house, and I never explained why. But I would take a sheet and I would cover the mirror because I just couldn't have that in my room. So when I turned 16, I met my first husband and we got married really quickly after we met. And the abuse started pretty much, we lived with my parents for about 6 months, my mom and my stepdad. And then we moved out and the abuse started pretty much as soon as we moved out. And I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that, but there was domestic violence. And then when we were 18, I gave my heart to the Lord and I really surrendered to him and I asked him into my heart. I asked him to be Lord of my life. I got plugged into a church. I started learning the Bible and so many things were so much better. As far as I knew I was on my way to heaven, I knew God loved me. I could hear God's voice and I had never experienced that before. I could feel his presence. I got baptized in the Holy Spirit. I got physically baptized in water and it was an amazing experience. But there was still extreme torment in my life. It was both. So on one hand, I had all of this great experience growing in the Lord and growing with the Lord and learning about him and walking with him. But then on the other hand, I was still having extreme torment. So some of the things that I still experienced was the noises in my house. That never stopped. It was almost like a joke even into adulthood that, because we knew it was demonic. I knew it was demonic. After I got saved, before I got saved, I thought, it was ghost or that type of thing. I didn't know what it was. I would have said it was ghost haunting a house and that everywhere I lived, there just happened to be a ghost haunting it. Or everywhere I went and stayed, there happened to be a ghost haunting it. But after I got saved, I realized through teaching and things like that, it was demons and that I was being tormented by them. But what I thought was because my biological dad had introduced me to the occult at such a young age, the conclusion we came up with is that it was like I was a magnet to them in some senses. And that I was just very sensitive to their presence because of being introduced to that at such a young age. I'm sorry, you guys, my nose is itching. I got some allergy stuff going on. Excuse me. Everything is blooming in Texas. So we just came to the conclusion that, I was a magnet for that. And I could sense it. And I absolutely could. I could walk into homes and know if there was demons there. Because I could feel them. I would feel terror. I would feel like the hair on the back of my neck stand up. But the problem was, it wasn't just when I walked into other homes. It was in my home 24/7. It never let up. I would hear things. I would feel things. I would see things. And it wasn't just me. Whenever I married my second husband, Ronnie, he had never experienced anything like that. So I went through a divorce and then I remarried. I married, his name is Ronnie. When we got married, I remember him just talking about, well, you didn't tell me about any of this following you. And I always joke and say, well, would that have been a deal breaker? And he used to say, oh, I don't know. But there were times that I remember one time he was in the bathroom and the shower curtain opened all the way down the rod. It wasn't like the wind just blew it, like it pulled back all the way down. And he saw that, and it really scared him. And then there was another time that he let our dogs out, and then he opened the door, let our dogs out, closed the door. It was a sliding glass door. And then he heard the dogs, and he went in there, and something had opened the door, let them back in, and shut the door again. And they were on the inside with the door shut. And he had just never experienced anything like that. By that point in my life, that was my early 20s, it was pretty normal to me. Not that I enjoyed it. I was terrified 24/7, but I didn't know how to make it stop. So it was pretty just normal occurrences. Like I felt like no matter where I lived, no matter what was going on, the stuff just followed me. And I don't want to say I got comfortable with it, because you can never get comfortable with things like that. But I got to the point of I just really didn't know what to do with it. So I tried to ignore it. You know, we can try to ignore the enemy and pretend like they're not there, but when they are, they make themselves known. And so that was a huge issue that I still dealt with. I still dealt with fear. Extreme terror, fear. I couldn't sleep at night with the lights off, especially when my husband would work third shift. I might as well just forget it. There was times that it would be 6 o'clock in the morning when the sun started coming up that I could finally fall asleep, because as soon as the sun started going down, extreme fear and terror would set in. I also could not take a shower. By that time in my life, I couldn't even take a shower if I tried to make myself. The only way I could get in my shower is if he came in there and stood while I took a shower, because if I was in a hurry, sometimes I would ask him to come in there just so I could get done. I was also still cutting. In that time, I started cutting a lot, sometimes daily, just to get through the day. It was a release. If you've never done it, it's hard to explain, but it's an addiction and it's a release. I have scars on my legs, my stomach, and my arms because I would just cut. Even at one point, I bought it was like a kit of X-Acto knives. I guess that's what they're called. Maybe not. I don't know. They were for crafting is what they were for. I think they were actually to make paper crafting. And it had all different sizes of razors in it. And I bought that specifically to cut. And my husband used to try to tell me, don't cut. Let me take that away from you. And the more he would try to take it away from me, the more I would do it. And I would tell him, you can't tell me what to do. I do what I want. I was very, very rebellious. There was no way I was letting any man tell me what to do. And so he stopped saying anything. If he saw cuts, he acted like he didn't. If he saw me doing it, he acted like he didn't. Because the more he would tell me not to do it, I would do it even more. And it would make it worse. Whenever I was married to my first husband, I was very, very passive. I was very much a doormat. And I would stand up to him sometimes, but not a lot. But whenever I went through the divorce, something switched in me, and it was like a light switch. I went from one type of personality to the next, and I became very, very aggressive. I got to the point where I said, nobody is going to tell me what to do. Nobody is going to put me in submission. Nobody is going to disrespect me. Nobody is going to offend me. And I became very verbally aggressive. I got into numerous verbal altercations. I put off I don't even know, I don't say vibe, so it's not vibe, no energy, nothing like that, but I put off the look and feel of just being very hard, and that nobody was going to walk on me. And you know, I thought I was justified in that, because I would say, well, it was because I was so abused that I wasn't going to let myself be abused again. But I didn't have balance. I went way the other direction with it. To just tell me to submit to my husband, I would have about wanted to spit in somebody's face. It would make me so angry. The word submission in and of itself would make my blood boil, literally. Like, I would get so angry, my face would turn red. You could always tell when I was the maddest. If I cried because I was mad, you better watch out, because that's as bad as it got. I was ready to just explode. I would have blackout rage at sometimes where I would get so angry, I would absolutely lose control, and I would not even remember what I said, what I did while I was raging. Submission was one of those things that would make me go that direction. People would joke and laugh about it. Even when they were joking, it would make me roll my eyes. I couldn't even spit that word out. Now, I would have said that I was submitted to God, but I absolutely was not. I was at that point in my life where I wasn't submitting to anybody. I was not. I had been abused. I wore it like a banner, and nobody was going to make me submit because I deserved to not submit because of the abuse. I may not have said that out loud, but my actions said it every single time. So I had a mistrust of God. I did not trust him. You know, in my heart, if you would ask me, do you trust God? I would have said, oh yes, absolutely. I trust him with everything. But my actions said, God, I don't trust you because you let me down. God, I don't trust you because you let the abuse happen. God, I don't trust you because you didn't stop it, and I don't understand why I had to go through that. So I was in the driver's seat of my life and never gave him full control because I didn't trust him with control of my life. It was almost like, and this was after looking back, in the moment, I couldn't have articulated any of this. I couldn't have told you this. But looking back with God and him going through this with me, I can tell you what it was. It was the idea of, he didn't keep me safe, so I better keep my hand on the steering wheel because he may not be paying attention. He may not have my best interest in mind, so I better make sure that I'm watching out for me because nobody else will. And I had that saying in my mind, everybody else will let you down, so you better depend on yourself. And that included God. I didn't recognize it as that at the time at all, and I would have told you, if you told me I lacked trust in God, I would have been angry. I would have said, who are you to tell me? I do, but I didn't. The depression was physically painful at this point in my life. And I'm talking about like from my early 20s to my early 40s. I'm going over this entire span of time. The depression was physically painful. I can remember at times just being curled up in bed and holding my chest together like this, trying to hold myself together because it felt like my insides were just going to explode. It felt, trying to describe it is really hard, but it felt like an emptiness that was painful. I felt so gut-wrenchingly empty that things were clawing at me, trying to pull at my insides, that it was physically painful. I was suicidal all the time. I was hearing voices. Well, that's not true. I wasn't acting out on the suicide. I was hearing thoughts. It's hard to put words to this. I'm sorry. I was having thoughts of suicide all the time, but I wouldn't act on them because from the time my son was born, he was my anchor in life, and I know God used him as that. He made it so that the thought always come to my mind, I would never do that to my son. I would not take my own life and make him have to live with that. And every time that it would get really, really close and it would get really, really bad and that I would be on the verge of, I just can't do life anymore, I would always remember, I can't do that to him. And that was the one thing that kept me alive every single time because I refused to do that to him. He had already lost one parent, his biological dad, because his biological dad left the picture and my current husband adopted him. And that's a whole different story that I'm not going to get into today, but it was a good thing. But because of that, I felt like he had already lost a parent, so I was not going to ever let that happen. And so I can remember the voices just telling me, your son would be better off without you. Your family would be better off without you. They don't really love you. You don't fit in. The only way you're going to escape this pain is if you kill yourself. And it was relentless. I heard it all the time, but I never would do it because of my son. I had extreme anger and aggression. I already talked about that, but I also had a critical attitude. I was critical about everything, everyone, every situation. I had a biting tongue. I had a gossiping tongue. I loved the juiciest gossip. I wanted to talk about everybody and everything. But I justified it because I said, well, I'm so sick that I can't really, engage in life. So I've got to have something to do, right? So the next best thing was finding out about everything, everybody, everyone, talking about them, being critical. Can you believe what they're doing? Can you believe what they're saying? the epitome of hypocrisy, the verse where it says, how can you take a splinter out of your brother's eye when you have a plank in your own? I had 2 planks in my own eyes, but I was looking at the splinter in everybody else's and not noticing that I was blind myself. And so I was really, really bad about that. You know, I would even say, oh, well, you know, I'm trying to find out stuff for prayer requests. You know, I just want to pray for people, but that was a lie. I just wanted juicy gossip. I wanted to know about people. I wanted to know what was going on. I felt like I had no life, and that gave me something to do. I was addicted to food. I would binge eat. So addicted to food. Mostly sugar. I can remember sugar was like my drug of choice. I would go to the gas station, sometimes even at night after everybody was in bed so nobody would see what I was doing. I would go to the gas station, and it would be nothing to get 4 candy bars, ice cream, and a big 44 ounce of Coke or whatever drink it was, and bring home and consume every bit of it. And I would binge eat all the time. I never felt full. I ate and consumed so many calories, but the sugar was really the worst. If I had any sugar in my house, I couldn't sleep at night without it being on my mind. I would have to get up and eat it. Like if I would try to buy a big bag of M&Ms and say, okay, I'm only going to have a few tonight, I couldn't sleep with the entire bag in my house. I would have to go eat all of them. And it was bad. I would try to go off sugar, and I would just always end up right back on it. I had weight issues all the time. Still working on that, but that's for different reasons right now. On the other side of that, I no longer have food addiction, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. And I would consume so many calories. But I always felt empty. I was very controlling and very manipulating. My son, I was so controlling with him. And, you know, he had his own issues because he had been raised by me, for one, and because he had some other trauma in his life. And I was so controlling over him. It would physically make me angry if I couldn't control my house. And, you know, we can look at that and say, oh, well, that's PTSD because you was out of control. We can call it whatever we want for now. We're going to talk about what it was. But I was so controlling. If he would just touch my remote control, I would feel like anger burn inside of me. I wanted him to do what I wanted him to do when I wanted him to do it. I was the same way with my husband. It's hard to even remember. It's hard to go back sometimes to who I was. My husband couldn't do anything right. He couldn't even breathe right, literally. Like, he could not breathe right because he would be sitting on the couch, and I would be so angry because he would be breathing too loud, or he would be eating too loud, or he would be doing this too much, or not that enough. He could not even breathe to make me happy. And the truth of the matter was, he was the one who did the cleaning, he did the cooking, he worked full time because I couldn't work. I was too sick at this point. I couldn't leave the house really. And he did everything, but I was so dominating and controlling and angry. And there was something that would drive me to, if he said the grass is green, there would be something in me that would make me say, well, it would feel like it would make me say, no, it's not. It's yellow. Like, I could never just agree with him. I could never let him be right. I could never just let something go, even if it wasn't right. If it was just a little bit off. Everything he said, everything. It didn't matter if he said, oh, I like to boil the eggs on medium temperature. I would have to say, no, you don't boil them on medium. You're supposed to boil them on high. That's not right. Everything he did, I contradicted. Everything he did, I tried to correct. Everything he did, I tried to control. And I was the same way with my son. I also had a lot of pity for myself. Now, when I was in the midst of it, I would have said, no, I don't pity myself because I recognize that other people have it way worse than me. And to a sense, that was true. I did always try to recognize that people had their own issues and those things, but I had pity in the form of justification. I used pity for myself to justify everything. God would tell me to reach out to people, and I would get so mad at him. So mad, because at this point in my life, I basically was going from my couch to my chair, my couch to my bed, and my bed to my couch. Because not only did I have mental illness, I also had physical illness. So I was very sick at this point. And he would tell me to reach out to people. And I would get mad and I'd say, well, God, I need people reaching out to me. Why are you telling me to reach out to others? Send somebody to reach out to me. I was so rebellious and I was so angry. The rebellion, oh my goodness. I remember one time he told me to write a letter to somebody because, I heard the voice of God. I heard from him. There were times I prayed over people. There were times I reached out to people. But for the most part, it was what was going on in my mind. He would tell me to reach out to people. He told me to write a letter one time. It took me 5 years to write that letter. I fought him for 5 years. And I kept telling him, when you heal me and I'm well, then I'll step out in ministry. Then I'll do what you've told me to do. When I was 18 and got saved, he started telling me then, within weeks, maybe months, I can't remember, that he was going to use me to heal people. He was going to work through me to heal people. And, throughout the years, there would be prophecies that would be prophesied over me. There would be people that would speak it. I would have dreams about it. I would have visions about it. But I just put it to the wayside. And I thought, I actually thought that God and I were at a stalemate because I thought that I was saying, God, when you heal me, then I'll step out in that. And I thought that's what was holding up me stepping in to being who he had called me to be. I thought me being sick and mentally ill was what was stopping it. But in all actuality, what was stopping it was my rebellion, my nasty attitude, my lack of submission, my manipulation, my being controlling. I was stopping moving forward. It wasn't, I was waiting on him. And he was telling me, there's things in your life you need to get control of and get out of your life. But yet I was stepping back with my arms crossed saying, not till you heal me, God. When you heal me, then we can do something together. And that never works out. So in parenting, I had nothing left to give. On most days, most every day. It took every single thing I had just to make it through the day. And I did not have a lot left for my son. I didn't have a lot left to give him. And, he needed me. Every child needs their parent. And I was physically there, but emotionally and mentally I was checked out. I was so focused on my trauma and what I had been through that I traumatized him because of my trauma. And I allowed my trauma to trump his trauma. And my trauma was the only trauma that mattered in the house. Because I was so focused on it, I didn't see what I was doing to the people around me. I didn't see that I was being used to destroy my son and to destroy my husband and to destroy the people's lives around me. I didn't see it that way. I seen it that I had been abused and that I had been hurt, and that was my only response, and that I didn't have a choice. I looked at it as I was who I was based on the trauma, and there was nothing I could do about it. And I was just setting in life waiting for God to come in and heal me. And until he did, this was just who I was because it was the effects of trauma. So some of the different things that I tried to get well. One was going to church, and I would pray about it. And I would ask God, take this from me, help me, move in me. But yet I would walk away unchanged because there were some things I wasn't willing to lay down. Part of it was I didn't know how. And part of it was I just wouldn't do it. I would not submit. I would not let the trauma be laid down. I wore it like a robe. I lived a victimhood mentality. I was wearing it, like your name badge, how when you work somewhere you have your badge on, mine would have said victim. And I wore it proudly. I joined groups on Facebook for victims. I connected with people over being a victim. The first thing, if you ask me, well, who are you? What are you? It would be, oh, I'm a sexual abuse survivor. That's not who I was. It's something that happened to me, but I allowed it to define me. I let the abuse define who I was. I stayed stuck in it. And in my clinical thinking, I just hadn't processed it enough. I hadn't healed enough because in my clinical thinking, I had to work through being healed, and I had to work through the process, and I just hadn't done that yet. Another thing I did is I went to school and became an MSW. I got a master's in social work because I wanted to help other people. I had been so damaged and broken that I wanted to help other people. But the problem was I was not healed myself. So I started doing therapy, and I sunk deeper and deeper and deeper into depression and deeper into anxiety. And it got so bad. That is when the cutting really got out of control. I would be doing therapy all day with kids disclosing abuse to me. And then I would come home at night and have to cut my body just to make it through the evening with my family. Because if I didn't, I would have been in bed and not been able to get up. It was so horrendous. So I only the next thing I did is I started in therapy again. Throughout my life, I went to therapy on and off. This was a Christian therapist that I started with. And we decided it was no longer ethical for me to practice. I was not at a healthy place in my mind that I could be practicing therapy at all. So I resigned. And that was a financial hit. I mean, it was a blow because we had bought the house we had based on both incomes, but it wasn't feasible anymore. I was physically getting sicker and sicker. This was in 2010, 11. And I was also mentally getting so much worse. And that's when she diagnosed me with some diagnosis. And she diagnosed me with the PTSD, which, I knew I had triggers all over the place. Smells, clothes. Like my husband, there were certain things he couldn't cook, certain things he couldn't say, certain phrases he couldn't say, certain ways he couldn't approach me, certain clothes he couldn't wear, certain shoes he couldn't wear, certain hairstyles he couldn't have, certain facial hair he couldn't have, things that he could not smell like, smells we couldn't have in our house, shows we couldn't watch on TV, states we couldn't even talk about, vehicles, trying to think of other things, lots of smells, things cooking, lots of TV shows. My triggers dictated our entire life. What I could be around, what I couldn't, what could be said, what couldn't be said. And then I also had paranoia. And there would be times that I would just feel like everybody was talking about me, everybody was looking at me, and I would need to get away from everybody, and I would kind of unplug from life and disappear for a little while. And then the other diagnosis was clinical depression, which, I share about that. To that point, I had shared about that a lot because that was another one that went with the abuse. So the PTSD and clinical depression, I shared about those all the time before. I would post in groups, we would talk about it, the chronic illness, all of that. We wallowed in it, in these groups. Don't know if you belong into any, but we absolutely wallowed in it. It wasn't about getting better. It was about coping. It was about learning how to cope with your mental illness. I looked at mental illness as any other type of illness. It was like the same as heart disease. And to me, you treated it the same. You treated it with medication and you treated it with therapy. And you learned how to cope with it, because heart disease doesn't just go away. You learn how you take medication, you learn how to adjust your life to cope with that illness. And to me, mental illness was the same way. You would learn how to cope with it. And so there was different medications I tried, different therapies, and all learning how to cope with it. And then she also gave me the big hefty diagnosis that I had not carried before. I had the symptoms. I'd had the symptoms for years, but I had never been diagnosed before because I had never really been open with some of the symptoms. She diagnosed me with Dissociative Identity Disorder, which is formerly known as multiple personality disorder. So that is when the idea behind it is when you go through trauma severely, especially as a child, part of your personality can splinter, and it's one body with multiple personalities living in the body. And they're very separate, distinct personalities. They can have different names. They are very different. They have different personalities. And I had these voices for a very long time. They had been added to over the years, but I'd had some of them for a very long time. And it's like I had gained more throughout the years. So part of the therapy is integrating with the personalities. You try to become one so that there is no more split. And the idea is to coexist in the same body, and the best way to do that is integrating. So I had a few different ones that were very prominent most of the time. One was a little girl, and when she was around, I would feel very alone. I would feel scared. I would feel abandoned. I would feel rejected. I would feel like I was getting ready to get hurt. My husband can remember coming home from work and I would be curled up in my bathroom floor rocking. I would write things like, where's mommy? When's mommy going to come get me? Different things like that. And it was very, very difficult. I would also be drawn to toys. When I would go into a store, I would get so drawn to toys. Sometimes I would buy toys because, trying to integrate. And I would have to hold my husband's hand like a child would hold their parent's hand. And if he let go, I would feel like I was just lost. I felt like a child. There was also another one that was very drawn to the occult and very drawn to things gothic and black and dark and magic and paganism. I never practiced those things, but I was very drawn to them, like a magnet being drawn to them. Some of my favorite movies were horror, about ghosts, about demons, about witchcraft. I loved Halloween. I loved decorating for it. I loved giving out the candies. Another one was a teen. She was very drawn to like pop music and just younger things. It would always cause me to like be in a place of not being age appropriate in my behaviors. Like I would be drawn to being younger. There was one more. I'm not even going to say this one's name. I'm not going to say the name of any of them. There were several, but only one more I'm going to talk about. This one was very, very what it called protective. It would say things like, I'm keeping you safe. They're out to get you. They just want to hurt you. This one hated my family. It hated my son. It hated my husband. It hated my mom, my dad, my entire family, because it would say things to me constantly. Look, they're just trying to hurt you. Look, they don't love you. Look, they're out to get you. And I would hear it over and over. It was relentless. All of the voices and all of the chatter. My mind was never quiet. My mind was never silent. I can remember it being the most odd thing. I would sit and I would have to have the TV on just so I could read a book, because it's like it kept part of my brain occupied just so I can concentrate to read a book. It never stopped. The chatter went on and on and on. So I was told to love them, to integrate with them, and to accept them. So that's what I worked on. The only way I can describe it is I would slide over into the passenger seat. I wouldn't get out of the car, my body, but I would slide over to the passenger seat and I would let them have the driver's seat, because I thought I was integrating. It made sense to me clinically. And that's what I did. So I'm trying to think of what year it would have been. In my early 40s, I'll just put it that way. Life had gotten very, very difficult. I was at my lowest. I really didn't know if I was going to make it. I was physically at the sickest I had ever been, and mentally, there was times I felt like I was holding on by a string mentally. It felt like I was in a deep, dark pit and that I was falling and I was not ever going to come out of it. I can remember thinking that I was going to go insane. The voices would tell me that I was going insane. They would say I was just like my biological dad and that I was going to lose my mind, that I was crazy, that I had his genes, that I was going to be just like him. And I just remember there were times I can remember specific periods in my life where I would sit on the side of my bed and I would say, my name is Nicole. My son is Trenton. My husband is Ronnie. And I would go through who I was because I felt myself slipping away. And the voices would say, life would be easier if you just give us control. Just let us be in the driver's seat. And they would say us. It was a us and we. If you just let us take over, you won't have pain anymore. You won't have torment anymore. You can step back and we will take over for you. And I was so tempted to do that so many times because of different parts and times of my life. It just felt like I couldn't manage. But there was always that check in my spirit that I knew you can't give total control over. You can't lay down and let them have total control. And so I never would. I would tell them no, that I was not giving them total control. We could integrate and they could be there, but they was not allowed to have total control. But I can remember thinking, I'm going to slip away and my mind is just going to be gone. And I was really afraid of that because I would feel it slipping deeper and darker into insanity. I felt like I had one foot already in the realm of being insane, and that it wouldn't take much to slip. There was times I can remember praying to God, Lord, just let me wake up and remember who I am. Let me go to sleep tonight and be able to wake up tomorrow and not have lost in the night who I am. Because there was that fear there that I would wake up and I would just be gone, because I could feel myself slipping more and more. The noises in my house continued. There were times I would wake up with bruises. I would wake up with handprints on my body, like fingerprints on my body. Like I had been just beaten in my sleep. I would wake up with handprints on my legs. Nightmares were horrific. I started having dreams that I had a demon in me and that I would be trying to tell people to get the demon out. But when I would open my mouth to speak, the demon would speak through me and I couldn't I couldn't speak. I had several dreams like that. And then my son told me, hey, I think you need to listen to this minister. I think that it might be something worth looking into. I said, okay, I'll listen to it. And that's when I first heard about deliverance. I had never heard the term, didn't know what it was never on my radar, never had a clue that a Christian could have the need to have a demon cast out of them. That was not on my radar my entire Christian life. I had never heard anything like that. I had heard things like, leave it at the altar and don't pick it back up. If you're not walking in freedom, it's because you're picking it back up. I would hear things like, just stand against the enemy, although I had no idea what that meant. I heard things like, well, you're just not taking your authority against the enemy. If you can't get freedom, you're not taking your authority against the enemy. But I had bought 100% into the idea that I had a chemical imbalance in my brain and that this was just my lot in life, that I knew God could heal me. And that's what I was waiting for. I was waiting for a physical and mental healing, because to me, my mental illness was a chemical imbalance created by trauma. So when I started hearing about deliverance, which deliverance is removing the legal rights of the enemy, of demons, to our lives and casting them out. The first sermon I heard, I said, oh my goodness, that is me. I knew in my spirit, it clicked, and I absolutely knew that was exactly what I needed. There was no doubt in my mind. So I started doing some research. I started reading some books, or I bought some books, and I started listening to some messages. I also started doing some prayer ministry, where in that I started learning about generational curses and having them removed, and how that we open the door to the enemy in our lives through our actions. So many things I had done in life, I had opened the door to the enemy. All of the horror movies I was watching, I mean, my goodness, my eyes, it was like the veil was just taken off. All we have to do is glimpse. I mean, you could squint and look, squinting with one eye in the Old Testament and still pick up on how much God hates magic and the occult and paganism. And yet I had invited all that into my home because I was watching it on movies. I was reading it in books. I all along thought, well, I'm not practicing it. I thought that as long as I wasn't practicing it, it was okay. But there is no distinction in the spiritual realm. If you are watching things with magic, if you are watching things with horror and ghost and all those paganism, occultism, all of that, it opens the doors to the demons, and it absolutely gives them legal right to our life. And I was doing all that. I had books. I had vampire books. They were my favorite books. I had read them over and over and over. I was so drawn to them. I mean, I probably read it was a 4-book series. I probably read it no less than 6 times. I would finish and just start all over again because I was consumed with it. Had no idea I was opening doors to the enemy. No idea. I had watched so many shows on television full of magic, full of the occult. I had went to haunted houses for fun. I had, you name it, I had entertained it. The enemy does not distinguish between practicing and entertainment. If we give him legal rights to our life, them demons, they will come full force in. So I started learning about all of that. And so I started emptying my house out of all of that. But then I got sicker and sicker and sicker, and I had to stop going to the prayer ministry. And I just felt defeated. Like I did not go back to watching the shows I had been watching, but I stopped pursuing deliverance for about a year. And it's really interesting because I didn't even remember this timeline at first, but it was about a year. And I just backed off everything. And I really got to the point where I thought I was going to die. I had a breathing issue that I ended up at the Mayo Clinic for. They never really got it diagnosed. They wasn't exactly sure what was going on, but I was on inhalers, steroids. And I mean, there was nights I thought, this is it. I'm not going to wake up in the morning. But then in May of 2020, it just, God started laying on my heart to fast for a week for freedom. And it's like he woke me up. It's almost like I slept for a year. I had never even talked to anybody about it. I had never told anybody in my family that I thought I had demons in me, that I thought that was the issue. And I don't even remember it really me comprehending that they were in me and needed to come out. I knew they were around me. I knew they had been tormenting me for years. I didn't know what was demonic. I didn't know what was physically sickness. I didn't know what was mental sickness. I was in a fog for that entire year. It was like the demons just had me so blinded. I couldn't see. I couldn't hear. It was just a very bizarre time. But anyway, it was like God cleared all that cloudiness away. And he said, fast for a week. And I said, okay, I'll do that. I'll fast for a week for freedom. Then he said, get other people involved. Make your need known. And I said, oh, I don't like doing that, because I did not want other people to know what I was going through. I never told anybody about the dissociative identity disorder diagnosis. That was one I kept very, very tight lid on. Nobody knew about that one. My husband knew a little bit, but he didn't even know everything, because that was the one, like, I didn't care. Everybody has some form of depression at one point or another. A lot of people have been through trauma with the PTSD. I didn't care for people knowing those. Those were like a badge of honor. You know, when you go through war and you get your badges of honor for going through it. I felt like that was what I came out of from the trauma. And I wore them proudly, as far as, not that I wanted them, but it was like I made it through, I lived through, and this is just my scars from battle. But the DID, that was a whole different story. That is a diagnosis that you never get rid of. That is a diagnosis that is very hefty. There is no medication for it. And so I didn't want to tell nobody about that. So anyway, the Lord said, get other people praying. I said, okay. So I posted it on Facebook. I posted that I was going to fast for a week for healing. And I think that's pretty much all I said, and that I would just ask for people to join me in prayer. And I had such an overwhelming response. I had people that didn't even know me responding. And I can remember thinking, why are they responding to me? Why would anybody want to pray for me? Because I felt so unworthy, so unloved, so shameful. I can remember another time, this is how deep it went. I had an aunt once. I have aunts. And one of them one time said, oh, I can't wait to see you, because I was coming on a visit. And I remember the voices telling me, she doesn't want to see you. She is just a very nice person. And so she's saying that because she's really nice. And she's just trying to make you feel better, but they don't want to see you. Nobody would want to see you. And so I can remember thinking, nobody would want to pray with me. Why would anybody want to pray with me? But it was like God was already pouring his love out and showing me that he loved me. And that's what I saw. In the people's response, I saw his love for me, because the voices had also convinced me that God didn't love me. I was in my early 40s at this point, and they had convinced me that if he loved me, I would have been free by then. If he loved me, I wouldn't suffer the way that I'd suffered. That there was something so innately wrong in me that he wasn't going to move in my life. That I had totally missed it when he said that I was called. into ministry, and that he was not going to do anything in my life, because if he was, he would have already done it, and there was something wrong with me that caused him not to. I never thought it was him that delayed the freedom or anything like that. It was always me. I always doubted his love for me because of me. I always looked at it as, well, he can't love me. But in doing that, I was doubting his character. Not only was I doubting me, I was looking at him and saying that he was somebody he wasn't, because his word says he loves his children, and his word says God is love. And so I was listening to the lies of the enemy, and I was seeing God through the lens of the enemy. I was seeing him through the voices in my head, and not him for who he really is. I wasn't allowing his word to show me who he was or who I was. I was allowing the enemy to tell me who he was. I wasn't reading the word of God much. It was painful to read his word. To be honest with you, by this point in my life, I would walk into church sometimes and I would hear screaming in my head. I would hear just the most vile. It was bad. It was bad. I would hear screaming. I would hear vile things in my head. I would hear curse words. And the whole thing was I knew I had at least one or two personalities that hated God and hated church. But in my mind, it was because of the DID, the Dissociative Identity Disorder, and they just didn't like God. So I didn't know that I didn't have to put up with that. I thought that it was just them. So I would try to ignore them, and I would try not to listen to them. When I would read the Bible, I would hear things like, tear it up, throw it, don't hold that in your hand. They hated the word of God. But in my thinking, it was because they felt let down by God. They felt like God had let us down because of not stopping the abuse. So it all made perfect sense to me at the time. So whenever God told me to put it online for people to pray with me, I did. And people started messaging me. I had so much encouragement. And then he said, tell your mom and dad to come over and pray. And I said, oh God, I can't do that. They live 2 hours away. That's too much to ask. Because I didn't feel like I was worth them driving 2 hours, because immediately the other voices said, you can't ask them that. They have busy lives. You can't ask them to drop everything and come 2 hours away. So I told God, I said, God, if it's really you wanting or saying for them to come pray for me, will you please tell them? I don't want to be the one to ask, but will you tell them? And it wasn't 5 minutes later, my mom messaged and said, I feel like that God is saying your dad and I need to come pray for you. I say, yeah, I think so too. And so we set the day that week for them to come. And I can't even remember what information I sent them, but I had read some more books. And I remember I had watched also some videos about deliverance and how to get free from demons. And so I sent them a little bit of information. I said, it's going to kind of look like this. I knew Dad was going to be leading it. And I'm like, he's going to be the one to take authority over the demons and cast them out. And I kind of gave him like a 3-point outline, I think is what it was. It wasn't much because we didn't have a lot of information back then. We had the Bible. We knew what Jesus did. And I had read a few books from deliverance ministries, and I'd watched several videos. So we just had that information. Well, then God started laying on my heart repentance. That week, I went through repentance like I had never been in my life. It wasn't, just this, oh God, I'm sorry. No, it was a deep, deep cleansing. It was me asking for repentance for everything I had done in my life that had not pleased him, for all the doors I had opened, for everything I had been involved in. But then it was also included generational stuff. It included generational sins that had been connected to my family. I was not repenting on behalf of for my family members specifically, but I was repenting on behalf of my bloodline for allowing these things to come in and asking God to release me from any generational curses attached to that sin. And it was deep. I can remember there were times I would walk across my floor and I would just end up on my knees in the floor, just bawling. I can remember sometimes I would be face down with my face in the carpet, my arms outstretched, just in complete and total surrender to him. I was to the point in my life that I was ready to give away anything, lay down anything, break off anything, do anything to walk in closeness with him. Because at that very moment, I got to the point where he was the only thing that mattered. He was the only thing. And that was a week, I can't even tell you the hours I spent in prayer. Because what had happened, I had looked into other deliverance ministries to go to them for prayer. And I couldn't find one that I actually could afford. They were very expensive, and I would have to have flown out of state. And so it just didn't work out. And that's when God told me to fast for the week and call in my mom and dad. So I said, okay, Lord. So they came. And as soon as they walked in the door, I had an anger rise up in me towards my dad. And I don't feel that towards him at all. I had not felt that before. I mean, this was something, when we first got, I mean, we got started pretty quick when he walked in. We didn't waste a lot of time. And he started by anointing my head with oil. And I don't even think I've ever told them this. But when he put his hands on my forehead, I wanted to claw his eyes out, and I wanted to smack his hand away. And I basically had to sit on my hands because I wanted to physically attack him. And I felt it in me. I felt a deep-seated hatred towards him. And I knew that wasn't me. There was no doubt in my mind that was not me. And when he started praying, the first thing that came out of my mouth was, if I remember right, and I don't remember all of it, was, who do you think you are? Or no, I think I was looking at my mom, and I said, who does he think he is? And I started mocking him and laughing at him and just making all kinds of fun. And I just remember thinking, he is so stupid. He's the most ridiculous person I've ever seen in my life. And I would never say that, and I would never think that. That would never be something that even crossed my mind, but I can remember feeling it. As those demons was manifesting through me and speaking, they spoke through me. They used my mouth and spoke through me. Because the thing you got to understand is I gave them so much control in my life. I gave them years of my life. Because I thought I was integrating and I thought I was doing therapy the way I was supposed to. I let them write through me. I let them do poetry through me. I let them express themselves through me. I took on part of their qualities because I thought it was me. And that was how I was going to live my most normal life. I let them abuse my family through me because I didn't know it wasn't me. So during my session, they started manifesting through me and started talking through me. And one by one, my dad was casting them out. And as each one was going out, I felt it. I felt its emotions, and I recognized that was not part of me. And I had no idea. I had no idea that these emotions were not part of me. But as they were coming to the forefront, I recognized, like the critical thinking all the time, and the aggressiveness and the gossiping. Each one, as it would come forward, I would feel it, and I would know, wow, that wasn't even me. That was something else inside me driving that behavior. It wasn't even me. There was one that came out and it just laughed and cackled, and it said, I make her fat. I make her eat and eat and eat, and she's never full. That was 100% accurate. About a week before I went through deliverance, God spoke to me and he said, no more sugar. And I said, I don't think I heard you right, Lord. What? And he said, I'm telling you, no more sugar. Break that addiction. So I wrote it down on a piece of paper beside my bed because it was at night. And I wrote the date and I said, God says no more sugar. And I had stopped eating sugar. But I mean, let me clarify. I don't want to say it falsely. I still eat sugar if it's in condiment or something like that. A little, not a lot. But since that week in 2020, I've not had candy, cookies, pop, ice cream, all of that, no desserts, all of that. And looking back, I know what happened. he had me surrender the addiction to him, so that when I was going to go through deliverance, that legal right would be removed and that demon wouldn't have a leg to stand on. And it came out. Because had I still been feeding that addiction, I would have been granting it rights to be there by feeding it. Every time I overindulged with sugar, I was feeding that demon. Every time I overindulged in food, I was feeding that demon. So now on the other side of it, I've lost weight. At my highest, I was 273 or 274, and now I'm down to the 220s. Thank the Lord. It's coming off, not as fast as I need it to be, but I'm also, because of being on my couch for 15 years, that gets me emotional when I talk about it a little bit. I was basically on my couch for about 10 to 15 years, give or take. In between there, I would have maybe a good year or a good 6 months where I was able to go out and do stuff. But it would always cycle back. The last 5 years I had, for sure the last 5 years, maybe even longer. I don't know. Time is so weird. But because of being inactive for so long, my muscles and my bones are not in a great place. They're getting better. But I'm in the process of working on that with stretching, and I had got to where I was like this. I was humped over all the time, and I had been like that for years. So it's like the process of sitting up straight, opening up, and changing the structure because of just being not in movement. My doctor actually said it's like frozen muscles. Like I dealt with frozen muscles for a while to where they're just trying to get active again through walking and those types of things. But anyway, I say all that to say I'm working towards some things still. But in that session, he broke addiction. Like, it just left. When it left, I no longer had that drive to eat and eat and eat. I would eat one meal and I would already be thinking about what I was going to eat next. Or I can remember I would hurry up and eat what I had so that I could get some of Ronnie's. I mean, it was just like a magnet to food. And all of that broke off. I no longer binge. Like I said, I don't eat sugar like that at all anymore. He's not released me to go back. I don't know if he will. If he does, okay. If he don't, that's fine too. It's whatever he says. Another one that came out, I would say the strongest one that came out, not going to give you names because names aren't important, but it said that it had been given legal right to my life because I had been dedicated to it through the shedding of innocent blood by my biological dad. And it felt very, very possessive of me. It did not want to let go. It was the one that was full of anger and rage and vengeance. Whenever it presented, I can just remember my teeth were clenched and I couldn't even open my jaw, and it was speaking through clenched teeth. And I remember too that I was sitting on one side of the room and my dad was sitting on the other, and I spit on him. I tried to pick up a trash can and throw at him, but instead of going at him, it went the opposite direction. I hit myself in the head. I pulled my hair. I remember turning my head from side to side so hard, it felt like it was going to pop off my shoulders. We didn't know a whole lot then. We didn't know to bind all that stuff and command it to stop before it started. We learned a lot through my deliverance session. But once that all got broken, it came out. And when that one came out, that was a huge one. There was another one that wouldn't come out. My dad was trying to cast it out. And in my spirit, the Lord gave me a word, and I knew why it wouldn't. It's because I had accepted it as my identity. And I had to break identity with it. I had to say, you're not part of me. I don't accept you as part of me. You were never me. And then it was able to come out. So there was different ones. We estimated, because my mom was taking notes and she wrote some down, we estimated there were between 40 and 60 demons that came out of me. Now, the thing that we had no idea. We had no idea. We didn't know going in what was what. When I went after deliverance, it took 4.5 hours. Immediately after, some of the things we noticed was my eyes was open wider, because my eyes had got to where they were just barely open like this. but my eyes were opened wider. I had also got to where I would just shuffle when I walked, like I would barely move my feet. And immediately my feet could lift up because I didn't feel like I had weights. Like I used to feel like there was thousands of pounds of weights holding me down and I couldn't move. That was immediately gone. I think I sat on the couch probably for 3 days just trying to figure out, okay, who am I? What happened and who am I? Because I had no idea how that stuff would break like that. I can remember one day afterwards, I was kind of bouncing through the house and I went into the bathroom and I may have been cleaning or something, I don't even know. And I looked in the mirror and I was kind of singing and I stopped and I said, God, what is this feeling? Like it was just completely foreign. And he said, it's joy. It's my joy. And I realized I had felt his joy for the very first time. I had never felt it before. I had had joyous moments, but I had never felt that deep, abiding joy before in my life. And I was able to experience his joy. And another thing that happened very quickly, I had went through deep repentance for the way I had treated my husband, my son also, but my husband. And when he came home after the deliverance, because he wasn't there for it, he had to work. When he came home, it was very important for me to verbally apologize to him. And I mean, I broke down, I was bawling. And to tell him how sorry I was, because once everything was out, I had clarity that I had never had before. I mean, it was immediate. I went from fog to not being able to see to complete, crisp, clear clarity. And God showed me I had allowed the enemy to use me as a weapon against my family. The enemy used me to cut them in half, used me to speak word curses over their life, used me to attach things to them that didn't belong to them. And so I apologized to him and I asked him, I said, I want you to pray with me and before God, I want to apologize, because it was important to me to not just apologize to him, but to go before God and apologize to God and apologize to my husband and have my husband accept my apology. I just felt very strongly that there was something really important there. And so we went in prayer and he forgave me. And I can tell you, since that day, and this is not a lie and this is not a stretch, and I'm not bragging because it's not me. It's because I refuse to walk in who I used to be. Since that day, I have not raised my voice to my husband. I have not called him a name. I have not yelled at him. And I've been submitted to him since that day. Now, I don't get it right every time. Sometimes I step out and over-talk him or talk over him and try to be the leader. And then immediately I am put in place by the Holy Spirit, because I pray all the time, God, help me walk in submission. It doesn't come natural for me. I don't know, maybe it does for you. It doesn't come natural for me. It's something that I have to keep on my radar. Lord, help me walk in submission to my husband. And then I will step back and say, I'm sorry, I overspoke. You decide. What do you think? Because I had so beaten him up that he wasn't even allowed to have an opinion in our marriage. He wasn't allowed to make a decision in our marriage. Everything had to go through me. I had to control everything. And that is not biblical. That is not godly. Some other things that changed in me. I am not drawn to being critical of people anymore. I actually love people. I thought I was a very hard, cold person, but I'm actually very tender. I cry at the drop of a hat, and I had no idea that's who I was. I thought I was an angry, aggressive person, and it turns out I'm not even angry at all. It takes a lot to make me angry. A lot. I can't even say, well, I can say this. I've not lost my temper once since then. Do I get angry? Yes. I'm not going to say I don't feel anger. I'm human and I feel emotion. But if you knew who I was, where if someone just glanced at me wrong, my face would turn blood red and I would be ready to verbally rip them to shreds. I don't feel that anymore at all. I don't feel critical. I don't feel angry. I don't feel aggressive. But the thing that I do in my life is I walk surrendered to God. I could easily fall back into old patterns because they try to come back. Of course, the enemy tries to come back. Of course, he still whispers. Of course, he still tries to trip me up. It is a discipline to not fall back into who I was. But I look on the life of who I used to be, and I know I will never be that person again. I will never go back to being her. That person is dead. When I say that I am alive and new in Christ, there's a newness, and I'm never going back to the old. I will never be her again. I refuse. And a huge part of that is walking in surrender to God daily. So anyway, I want to wrap up. I've been talking a long time, but I feel like there's so many important points to the testimony. I don't know how to shorten it. So immediately almost, God told me, he said, share your testimony. I said, okay, God, I'll share it. And so I shared it online on Facebook, just like I'm doing now. But I did it at 11:30 at night because I didn't want anybody to come on and comment. I didn't know what people's reaction would be. It wasn't like I was like in fear of their reaction, because that's something else that also stripped off of me. I wasn't concerned about what people thought. I was only concerned about doing what God said to do. You know, I identify in the Bible with Mary Magdalene. The Lord set her free, and then she became a follower of him. In my opinion, when he comes in and sets you free like that, the only logical response is to lay your life at his feet and say, God, I'll follow you every day of my life. Every word you tell me to speak, my answer is yes. Everywhere you tell me to go, my answer is yes. Everything you tell me to do, my answer is yes. There is no other response. When you have been so bound by the enemy, and you have been so tormented, and then God comes in, there is no other response than to lay your life at his feet every single day. Our lives are not our own. They've been bought with a price. We owe everything to him. He owes us absolutely nothing. When Jesus died for us, he gave us all. He gave us everything. He's already given every part of him. He held nothing back from us. Nothing. In turn, we should hold nothing back from him. We don't have to wait for him to give us anything. He's already given it to us. We already have it. We have an eternal promise to be with him forever. Our only logical response is to lay our lives down and walk for him and do for him. So when he said, give your testimony, I said, okay. They already thought I was crazy before. They're really going to think I'm crazy now. But I didn't care. Well, I must have cared to some extent because I didn't do it till 11:30 at night. I just remember thinking, I don't want to answer a bunch of comments. I don't know how to answer a lot of questions yet. And that was really on my mind. I just wanted to tell my story, but I didn't want to answer a lot of questions because I wasn't sure how to answer them. So I gave my testimony. And then after I gave my testimony, people started reaching out to me. And they started wanting to go through deliverance. And they wanted me to help them get free. And the Lord told me when he set me free, he said, I gave you the blueprint to get free. Now go help others get free. Because he showed me how to prepare for deliverance. He showed me how to step and walk through deliverance. And then he showed me how to maintain my freedom. It was a 3-part. It's always a 3-part. Preparing, deliverance, and maintaining. And I said, okay, God. And so I started helping people. Pretty much, I think, maybe in June or July of that year, I started helping people get free. From that, I started just posting more online. And then he started giving me messages to teach. And I was like, you know, when he gave me the first one, I was like, okay, God, I'll share that. And then he gave me the second one. Okay, God, I'll share that. Now on YouTube, I don't even know how many videos there are and things that are posted. He just keeps giving me more. And I told him, I said, God, Every message you give, I'll share. Until you want me to step away, step down, I will say whatever you want me to say. So as long as he keeps giving messages, I keep sharing messages. And then I started the Facebook group. And it grew and it grew and it grew. And then he gave me the name of the ministry, because at first he didn't give me the name. The first 8 months, there was no name on the ministry. And then he told me to fast and do some consecration and some praying and some seeking. And he gave me the name of the ministry, and it was Fullness of Joy. And it was based on Psalm 16:11. And the verse says, "You will show me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. In your right hand there are pleasures forevermore." And he gave me the name. And now I still do one-on-one deliverance sessions with people. I do a lot of teaching. I do some mentoring. I do some prayer ministry. I do some speaking engagements. Basically, I do whatever God says do. I don't define it. I don't put a label on it. When he says do, I say yes. My whole heart is to do exactly what he wants me to do, when he wants me to do it, and say exactly what he wants me to say. In my case, there was zero mental illness. I never had mental illness. I was diagnosed with mental illness, and I bought the lie that it was a chemical imbalance that I would live with unless God healed me. God didn't heal me. He set me free. God delivered me, because in my case, it was not a physical condition. It was a demonic condition. It didn't need healing. It needed deliverance. And he came in and he made the demons leave. As soon as they left, I've not had one symptom of any mental illness since then. Every single PTSD trigger is gone. I can watch any show on TV I want. I can go to any state I want. As a matter of fact, the state that I couldn't go to before we went on vacation. And that would have been impossible before. And I had not one issue being there. Not one. Never even crossed my mind to be anxious. Never even crossed my mind to be fearful. I went to that state and I had an amazing week with my family. Before, that would have been impossible. It would have been torment. I don't have any depression. I've not had one symptom of depression since May 24th of 2020, and I've not had any voices. They are gone. So for me, the mental illness was a false label that was actually demonic torment. Am I saying that's the case for 100% of people? I don't know. I don't know where the line is at. I don't know where that is. But I am saying that there are cases of mental illness that are demonic in nature. I do think that there are cases that it can be from imbalances as far as hormones. There can be other conditions that cause anxiety. There's other physical conditions that cause depression. So I'm not saying that it's 100% demonic in nature. We have natural bodies that are affected by natural diseases, but I am saying that it can be demonic in nature. I never knew that before. I never knew that mental illness could in and of itself be 100% demonic, and in my case it was. I've not had one symptom since. And many of the people that I've worked with in deliverance have had mental illness symptoms, and once they go through deliverance, it's gone. Not always, but a lot of times, because it just depends on what the root cause is. We always have to seek out what is the root cause, and if it's demonic, deliverance is what's needed. So I say all that to say that God is still in the chain breaking business. There's nothing that he can't do, and there's nothing that he won't do for us. But in my life, I sat back and I just waited for him, because it's two parts. Our relationship with him is two parts. He always will do his part, but we have to be willing to do our part. We have to be willing to lay down the things he says to lay down. We have to be willing to walk in submission. We have to be willing to lay down rebellion. We have to be willing to stop questioning the things that have happened in our life. Can I explain to you why I was sexually abused? No. I don't know why. I don't know why obviously we live in a fallen world and people are given free will, and because of that there's sin. That was never God's plan. God's plan was to walk with us, to be with us, and then sin entered. So that's why people do the things that they do. But do I understand why God doesn't step in every single time? I don't have to understand. What I have to do is get in the Word and know who God is. I have to know His character based on His Word, based on His truth. I have to look at God through the lens of truth, which is His Word, and not look through it through the lens of trauma. We can get so stuck in the trauma that we can't even see God for who He is. We can't even know Him personally because we're so stuck in looking through everything through the lens of trauma. Trauma happens to us and it's not us. You know, I used to think that, to carry the scars of the trauma was like bold and brave, and that I made it through, and I would wear those as a badge of honor, that I had scars on my heart. And then the Lord told me when I was going through deliverance, the way He speaks to me a lot of times is through questions, because it really gets my attention. And He said, do I heal perfectly? And I had to stop and think, well, yeah. There's no examples in the Bible where Jesus didn't heal perfectly. He heals perfectly. I have no more scars. There are no scars on my heart from the abuse at all. There are no scars in my life from the abuse. It is still part of my story. It is still part of what happened to me, but it doesn't dictate who I am. It doesn't define me, and I'm not broken. I'm not bent. I'm not damaged, and I'm not even scarred. I am healed perfectly. If you could look at my heart, you would see absolutely no scars there, because He healed perfectly, and He could do that for you. No matter what you're going through, no matter where you've been, no matter what has happened to you, He can heal you perfectly, and He wants to heal you perfectly. And if you have demons attached to your life, He wants to set you free. Please feel free to reach out to me. I've went really long, so I'm not going to take questions. If you have questions, please message me, or message them on this video when you watch it, and I would be glad to answer them. But I'm not going to hang out anymore, because I've taken a lot of your guys' time. I appreciate you hanging out with me. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime to talk about anything. If you don't know what you're facing and you're not sure, reach out. I would love to help you. Love you guys. Thank you for hanging out with me. Love you, Mama. Not sure. I do see you're still in there. Thanks for hanging out. I know you've heard my story a million times, but thank you. You can find my books on Amazon. I have one that describes deliverance ministry, exactly how I do deliverance ministry. Look under my name, Nicole Henson, on Amazon, and you can find that one. And you can also find the one where I give my full testimony step by step. Love you guys. Good night.